sobre la experiencia británica en materia de screening o control o fiscalización de la entrada de inversión directa extranjera, que se plasma a través de esta ley de reciente adopción, the National Security and Investment Act, la ley de seguridad nacional e inversiones. Es un tema muy importante hoy en día, estamos hablando justo antes del seminario, y para ello va a hablarnos, tenemos como invitado al colega Frederick Colthorpe. Frederick Colthorpe. He's, I don't know in English the position, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it in Spanish. Yeah. Encargado de Seguridad de Inversiones, Departamento de Seguridad de Comercio e Inversiones, Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores, Commonwealth, Desarrollo del Reino Unido. So basically, Frederick is a representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. So he's traveling in Chile in the last days, actually to share the UK, the British experience on this bill to our colleagues of the Chilean administration and government. So that's it. We have also two colleagues from the British Embassy, Claudia and Adam. So thank you very much, Claudia and Adam, to make this seminar happen, make this possible. As I said, this is a very hot topic for us. Chile has not still adopted a screening foreign investment bill or anything similar to that, but it has been on discussion, at least in the media and in the academia, for 2 years now, since the investment of the Chinese company State Grid into our electric sector, when they bought the majority of stakeholders of CFE, of the main electric distributor company that before was owned by Italian Spanish international corporation. So State Grid is a state-owned company, which is sensitively different from the previous owner. So after that happened and the acquisition was totally approved by the Fiscalía Nacional, it's like the Antitrust Commission, I don't know how you say it in English, the jurisdiction in charge of antitrust law. And it was very interesting because when you look into the legal issue, it was some new arguments that I saw in Chile for the first time. They were rejected, of course, but they were the first time in Chile we tried to argue about how geopolitics is modeling the economic reality, especially in terms of foreign direct investment. So thank you very much. Let's listen to you. How long do you want to make your presentation, more or less?
20-25 minutes.
Wonderful. Yeah. After that, we will debate with our students that are and researchers who are here in the room. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so the National Security Investment Act, it's the UK's investment screening mechanism. And I'm going to be talking about how it came about, the history of foreign investment law in the UK, how it works, and then some of the analysis that we do, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion and talk about what might happen for Chile and other areas in Latin America. So, what is the National Security Investment Act? So it was written in 2021, over a few years before, and it came into effect in 2022. It modernizes our previous Enterprise Act, which was written in 2002. So that was something that had been there for a long time, but with Brexit, with COVID, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, things like that have all required us to tighten up our legal protections and the systems that we have to ensure that foreign investment is safe and secure. The system itself is based in the Cabinet Office, which I think the equivalent of that is, in Chile, what was it? Like a cross-cutting kind of government department that manages others. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, as you can tell from the name, it seeks to protect the UK's national security, but there is also a promotion aspect as well to welcome foreign investment.
Interior.
And as I say, it provides those businesses and foreign investors with a system that can be trusted and is safe and secure, so that when foreign investors are looking at the UK, we're not closing down the economy, we're opening up and letting people know that when you have a foreign direct investment project in the UK, you're going to have certainty around it. Sorry. Okay, so the principles. We look to, with the NSIA, to protect the UK's national security, to promote it to foreign investors, and our approach is actor agnostic. Now, Ultimately, it's the government's duty to protect the UK from national security risks, of course. And economic security is a big part of that. And national security itself is an umbrella term. It takes into account a lot of things. As I say, economic security, energy security, critical national infrastructure, the list goes on. National security itself can be a loose term. It doesn't necessarily need to be defined as a threat of war. So there are systems based on mandatory notifications for sectors that are that would pose a greater national security risk. So things like nuclear, defence, dual use technology, AI, advanced materials, quantum, etc. These are all sectors that can expose through foreign ownership, maybe some sort of uplift to other countries that would have a detrimental effect to the UK. But then on the other side, of the same coin, we are promoting the UK. You should be able to invest in the UK, and you should have clearly defined guidelines and legal requirements when doing so. So the certainty and transparency comes through in the National Security Investment Act, and you have a voluntary system as well that applies to the whole economy. Businesses can say if they think there's a national security risk with an acquisition or a significant investment, they can let us know via the portal that we use online. We can screen the transaction, the acquisition, in exactly the same way. Now, something that we do differently to some other countries is our actor agnostic approach. We don't discriminate or filter based on nationality or origin of investment. Other countries have an exclusivity of national security in their systems that we don't share. So we have a balance between protection and promotion. And all of the countries, no matter where it comes from, are subject to the same process. So, what else does it provide? As I said before, transparency and visibility. We publish all of our final orders on the gov.uk website. So you can see the outcomes of particular cases and transactions to see, these have been cleared because of X, Y, and Z. We're imposing certain remedies because of X, Y, and Z. And we have our annual report as well. So we just released the second one because 2022, 2024. And there's lots and lots of statistics and figures and charts that I'm going to show some of those later. And it evaluates what the NSIA does, how it does it, and how its performance has been over the year. Now, as I just said, remedies and mitigations are in there. So as part of the powers of the Act, we can intervene in transactions that we deem to have a national security concern. And those might be things like restricting access to intellectual property or to certain sites or to certain assets and restricting them from being moved outside of the UK or to potential malign actors from their access to what we have or what those businesses have. So ultimately, they are mitigations. They're not blocks. They're not kind of cutting things off. They are mitigating those national security risks and not compromising the economic benefits of the transaction. And then the iterative change is how NSIA evolves and how we make sure that it stays up to date with trends and upcoming risks. So things like AI, obviously growing and booming, and quantum computing, the whole thing. We need to understand the trends that are around that and what it means for emerging tech and upcoming UK businesses. And the NSIA can bring clarity to that, and we can help record what comes in and what we approve. How does the NSIA work? So we have 4 stages, and it begins with a notification stage. So as I said earlier, you have mandatory and voluntary notifications. Mandatory notifications are there's sensitive sectors such as the AI, etc., nuclear defence, and there are 17 of those sectors. When a significant investment occurs, the government has to be notified by law of this acquisition. Okay, once all of that has been submitted to the investment screening unit in the Cabinet Office, they will have a set of information on the structure chart of the businesses both before and after the acquisition. So there'll be information on the ultimate beneficial owner of the transaction and who's going to own the business, whether that's the business itself or stakeholders in there. And we need to understand a lot of information about the transaction to ensure that we can have the full picture. When we have those, all that information together in the notification, it's all pooled in a case management system, and that government departments can see, and the kind of investment screening unit pushes to us to say, what do you think about this transaction based on the information that we have? There are 30 working days to assess that initial period of review, and government departments can feed in and say, we think that this transaction should be cleared because it poses no national security risks, or we think we should intervene and have a proper look at it, ask some more questions, get some more information. Now, the average time for last year for that initial period was about 6 or 7 working days. So it's something that moves quite quickly, and it's usually pretty obvious what the national security risks might be from a transaction. Now, when a government department, whoever it may be, raises a particular national security concern or something they want to find out more about, that's when the call in happens. Every week or so, the relevant Secretary of State, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, I'll just call him CDL for now, is given a list of these transactions that are potential national security risks and concerns, and will essentially sign off, we should pull these in because of the recommendation given. And when that happens, that's when the call in occurs. We have a system where the investment screening unit, based on that approval, will then reach out to the businesses and give them a kind of initial call to say, here's what the process, here's how it works, here are some of the questions that we're going to ask you. And once again, there's a 30 working day period, a statutory one, where we scrutinise the transaction, we ask questions of the businesses to understand maybe a potential shareholder is somebody that is state linked, and we need to understand what their access to intellectual property sites assets might be, and or even the business plans for the transaction after it's occurred. So you might have a business that's buying a maybe declining UK business in one of these sectors, and they just want to renovate it and sell it on. That's something that we can kind of say, okay, good stuff, that's great. But maybe you've got something where they want to buy the business, renovate it, and then offshore it from the UK. That kind of concern is something that will potentially be a national security risk if it's something sensitive like submarine tech or let's say dual use defence, things like that. Then we need to work out with the business what can be done to keep the UK's national interest emphasised. So during that time, there'll be a lot of involvement with government departments to so say it's the Ministry of Defence, have a contract with the company, they need to negotiate a bit more how that contract's going to look after the acquisition. And over those 30 working days, you will have different assessments put together based on the government department that's been commissioned for them, and you'll reach a decision. So as part of the final document, the investment security risk assessment, that will have an economic assessment, a national security assessment, and where relevant, specific assessments on energy security or maybe something about shipbuilding or something, based on the government department that suits it best. So with all the information kind of taking into account the concerns from the national security assessment, the economic benefits from the economic assessment, things like jobs created and things like that, assets like Ports UK, a recommendation will be given at the bottom to say, based on the information above, we think we should clear the transaction because it's fine to go, the national security risks aren't a concern. We should clear the transaction with interventions or remedies, or we should block the transaction. So for those interventions, as I said, they're mitigations at the end of the day. It's something that we can target a particular individual or particular business or where the national security concern comes from, and then isolate it and say, to prevent our concerns, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then the final kind of last block where interventions wouldn't do enough is when you block the transaction. This past year, we didn't block any transactions. Everything was either cleared or cleared with remedies. So once all of that's been put together with a recommendation, it goes back to the CDL, back to the Secretary of State, and he is given the final say with all the information. He can tick off the recommendation. When he gets that, there is the option for other ministers to feed in and send a letter to say, I agree with my office's recommendation. don't worry. Like if it's a big case, like if it's something we had recently, the Heathrow Airport, that was bought in a joint venture by a French company and a Saudi Arabian company. We had a lot of ministerial interest. So to give that kind of assurance to the minister who's signing off, we had other ministers feed in and say, yeah, we agree with the recommendation. So, as I say, this kind of system is a kind of wheel where you have the main kind of case managed by an investment security unit, and based on the sector, based on where the business is going or what it does, you'll have different input from different government departments. So something like battery storage or general kind of national grid energy things will have involvement from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Something like the Home Office for domestic and security, Ministry of Defence, and DSIT for AI, etc. And you will have this whole kind of process where everyone feeds into the investment security unit and in the Cabinet Office, and they put together this ISRA investment security risk assessment from all the input. So, as I mentioned earlier, the annual report. So this annual report covers 2023 to 2024, and here, I mean, these are some headline stats, but as I say, the annual report's a public document, so feel free to have a look at it and read it. But the vast majority of businesses have zero interaction. Our critical sectors are somewhat focused, and even though there's 17 of them, it's a very kind of specific set of things. The one of the main points is that 95.6% of close to 1,000 notifications were cleared within the first 30 working days. There was no kind of either no call-in necessary or the national security concerns were completely dispelled. And in the remaining acquisitions, there were 41 call-ins, and there were only 5 final orders, which gave which had interventions or remedies as part of them. So you have a good kind of balance to show that it's not something that closes down an economy. It facilitates investment. It gives that assurance and security to foreign investors. As I said, it's public document, so feel free to have a look. So here's some of the categories or sectors that we use, and you can see that obviously the main one is defence, and then you've got a very kind of strong, like a very kind of strong dip in the where the other notifications are, and you can see as well that the mandatory and voluntary split is quite different. Then the actor agnostic approach. So I said this earlier, this doesn't discriminate based on nationality or origin of investment. All of the transactions that are coming to the system are screened the same way. There's no specific policy for America or China or France or wherever. And you can see that as well. The top ones are UK businesses. There will be some sort of national security concern over those important sectors. And when you can see that the UK and the US are the top two, then it dispels a lot of the kind of geopolitical biases that can come around from this kind of thing. The other countries are where it's been like only 1 or 2 from particular countries. There's things like South Korea in there, and there's like Angola and things like that. Loads of quite a mishmash of countries that wouldn't fit in the same way. So it's listed. And you can still kind of, as I say, like the allied countries, the US, France, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, Italy, whatever, all have that same risk potential. In Latin America itself, there's no kind of investment screening system in process, or in force. And this most similar kind of systems I can find anyway are from Peru and Mexico. Chile have a similar organization to the Peruvian one, the Invest Chile, and the whole point of this Peruvian organization is to attract foreign investment. There's no screening process. They have the kind of legal restriction to say you can't have something that affects public health, national security, but they don't define it, and environmental conservation. And then the Mexican one, theirs is the most kind of advanced in the region, and they updated it in 2023 with the Americans. But since then, there's been a kind of lost in translation of what the Americans want and what the Mexicans want, and based on that, it's slightly different. But they have similar legal powers and similar kind of screening capabilities, but they don't use them as well as they could, or there's no kind of interest in blocking any of the transactions, things like that. But that's subjective. And then their sectors are again nuclear power, radioactive minerals, telegraph radio services, and postal service, and a few more things which can't be owned by anyone except for the Mexican government because they're critical sectors. And as I say, as we know, and as we said earlier, investment screening is a kind of a big conversation both across the world and in Chile itself. And I will say that Chile is the only OECD member that doesn't have an investment screening system, and so it's something that is maybe can kind of be brought up with the times, but of course, as we said earlier, it needs to be in Chile's national interest to do so. If you need to talk about it more, kind of after this, Adam from the British Embassy is a good guy to go to for further conversations, and there's plenty to talk about going forward. And I can talk a bit more about this, but I'm going to end there and kind of throw out the discussion side that I mentioned earlier. So if there are any questions, please do ask.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring. It's a real exercise of transparency and accountability. As usual, the British Public Administration is up to its reputation again. So I can talk, I have a lot of questions, but I share the room with the students and colleagues. Maybe someone wants to deal, please.
Yeah, thank you for.
Maybe you can present yourself first.
Yeah, my name is Diego Black. I'm currently a research assistant here for the institute. I happen to be working in things related to investments, so that's really a very interesting topic for what I'm working on. So first, I wanted to ask you if you could maybe give a couple of examples of investment projects that didn't pass the screening process, but that were still notified. You mentioned around 5% of the projects only were stopped by the screening notice. So maybe you could give us some more detail about what were the characteristics of these investments to better illustrate the criteria followed by this act. Maybe you could tell a couple of examples, please.
So the main one that occurred last year was Huawei, the 5G network, and that was one that was blocked because of the national security concerns around it and the kind of data access and IP access, things like that. Now the final orders from this year are transactions that have been cleared. So they've kind of flagged a national security concern, and there were remedies or mitigations put in place, but ultimately they were cleared and allowed to go ahead. The big ones, things like the Heathrow Airport one, because it's critical to national infrastructure and things like that. And we have a lot on battery storage as well in the UK. There are a few cases there where things like the national grid are obviously key to protecting the UK, and it's how it runs every day. I can't give you a specific example off the top of my head, but because the final orders are published, feel free to look at them. Yeah, it's usually things like a threat posed to the UK's critical national infrastructure, or how we run our military or our navy, things like that. So there is a potential for those to be stopped or impeded, and that's where the kind of criteria, the trigger event comes.
No, when all the documents are published online, they're published on gov.uk. So there's the annual report is published online. It's about 100 pages, I think.
Yeah, it's quite long.
It's a big document. You can find it on gov.uk and read everything. And the final orders for each of the decision making again is posted on gov.uk. So it's transparency in terms of understanding the investment, but also transparency in terms of telling people what the UK government is doing about it. And we'll do uploads and share the link.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. Very good question. Anyone has other question to be addressed or guests? No? Leonardo? Yes? No? Well, I have a few questions. I have like two big questions, maybe. The first one is, I'm sorry, I'm not so well informed about the UK reality, politics and economy. So, what is the origin of this bill, this act? Like we used to say, like European continental law system, no? We used to talk about like the spirit of the law, isn't it? Or the intention of the lawmakers. So, what was the political and intellectual context for the draft of that bill? At that time, who were investing heavily in the UK? Saudi, China, I don't know, Qatar, I have no idea. How the problem of the time was introduced into the agenda, no? The public policy agenda, we used to say in class, no? Because we cannot really disconnect like the administrative procedure with the political context, especially for us, what we're not so well informed about the UK reality. So that's been changing a lot, that we're talking before with that. No? The Brexit is like a totally different world, and I'm not so up to date.
But you were in 2002, right? Initially.
Excuse me?
Are you in 2002 when the experience was in place, or this new change in 2022?
The new. So there's a picture, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
what happened between these two moments?
So between 2002 and 2022, the Enterprise Act, the National Security Investment Act, there were like 10 or 11 transactions that were caught by the Enterprise Act over 20 years. You've had sort of 2,000 that have come through since 2022. There were a lot of concerns around economic security generally with Brexit and updating free trade agreements, things like that. And then the kind of difficulties around COVID and Russian invasion of Ukraine. So when you have significant investments coming in from Chinese companies, American companies, some Russian companies, and things like that that are sensitive and are targeting emerging tech, defense capabilities, critical national infrastructure, there was a kind of push to prioritize the UK's national security. We can't just sell off all these things. And one of the big ones was Huawei for the first year of the Act. And it was a general kind of consensus. I must admit, I can't speak to any political actions, but also specific transactions that would have been caught in kind of retrospectively. But there is that kind of general concern around economic security that was prioritized based on large investments anyway.
There is any investment before 2022 that went through that was it did happen, it was legal, valid, and it really grows a red flag into the public opinion or into some MP, I don't know. But like the case of Chile with this example of the electricity, there was like some, or on the European Union, as you know better than I do, the European Union framework for the screening for the investment was dropped, after the acquisition of a Chinese company, of a German one, who owns intellectual property on robotics, right? So I went in all the European newspapers, and people were worried about it. Oh my God, we're selling our intellectual property. It took us like 50 years of public investment to develop, not such a good idea. So they created this, it was 2018, something like that. So it was before yours, Bill. So yeah, it wasn't, as I said, any red flag associated to one big controversy or big operation that because the Huawei 5G didn't happen, right? So
yeah,
so it was like it was going to happen, and then they make the bill to no. That was the case. The smoking gun, because we said that.
I'm not 100% sure about it. I will find out and I'll come back to that. Yeah, you can't say details, but yeah, I can't use that.
I mean, that Huawei issue came about when Boris Johnson was in power, so that was before 2022. That did impact the public debate. There is quite a strong kind of public debate in the UK and Europe, particularly in the US, about kind of national kind of interests. I think sometimes this act is called the National Security Investment Act, and I think sometimes that can be misleading in a way, because people think it's only about kind of defence and security. I think it probably make more sense if it was called the National Interest Investment Act, because things like, economic security, supply chain security, energy security, critical national infrastructure security, it is not a good idea, generally speaking, for any one country or anyone else, perhaps, other than the host country, to have a majority stake in, say, the energy distribution network. or the nuclear power stations in the country, or increasingly that critical national infrastructure is, developing, and increasingly includes things like data centers, because of their, the absolute centrality of them to modern life. London as an international financial centre has a huge demand for data centres, connectivity, internet, for all the traders that happen nearly every second through the London Stock Exchange, for example. And that is of critical importance to the UK, as a driver of the UK economy. And that again is national interest. So
Internet, maritime cables, no?
yeah, exactly.
In the country.
Sea cables.
Yeah, and in the last 12 months, there have been 4 or 5 subsea cables that have been severed in suspicious circumstances in Europe, by whoever and for whatever reason. So, again, that is a kind of a concern. Whereas before they weren't really of interest. They existed, but they weren't. They didn't have such a high profile in either the public discourse or government policy.
Yeah, data center is a critical infrastructure for national security. This idea itself now is like a common sense. At least for us, I think we are kind of, I don't know, into this topic. But maybe the public opinion has not yet been.
And from where
But it's going in that direction, that's for sure.
yeah, and I think that this is a personal opinion. The same is true in Chile, right? You have an AI quantum industry, domestic industry that's developing. You have plans to build a whole raft of new data centers. Access to that data and being able to use that data or protect it is really important. And that, how do you do that without assuring how you're building those centers or who's investing to build those centers? And but I don't have the answer, obviously. This is in this specific question, it's entirely a question of Chilean national interest.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we talked before the seminar started, like when we talk about national security and economy, like spontaneously, let's be honest, okay? We think about anti-China bill. I'm sorry about that, but this is what we believe in 2024. So any kind of economic nationalism or protectionism is considered as an anti-China thing. But in reality, what we say is more about autonomy, like the European Union likes this term, like strategic autonomy.
Yeah.
We can use one narrative or the other depending on the situation, of course, and we're not politicians, so it's not our job to choose the narrative, but at least to analyze it, to understand it. No? So the thing is both. It's about, in my generation, we call it about national sovereignty, but I don't know. I feel maybe I'm too old-fashioned. So now we talk about autonomy or national security, but it's about sovereignty. Yes. As old as the birth of the nation states. No? So can I do something else, if you don't mind? Do you have time?
Yeah, of course.
I want to go a little bit more into the technical criteria of administrative law. I know UK has a different conception of administrative law, but I'm kind of curious. So you were talking about 17 areas. How do you define an area? Is the business itself, the company itself has to declare its area of activity somewhere, how do you call that in the UK, the registered deed, something like that? Cámara de Comercio?
Yeah.
Or es comercial, I don't know.
Yeah, the
Chile, la Comisión de Mercado de Valores, CMF, es la que coordina, that organization, CMF, is the organization in finance, supervise all the stock company or published company that trade the financial stock.
No, I'm talking about public company only in the Bolsa de Santiago, any company. So how do you determine the activity? And there is any loophole there? Do you detect any try to like a manipulation of the system to call yourself like a company in that area, but indeed you are doing something else? You have intellectual property that more sensitive. You know what I mean? Wasn't a kind of like, I don't know if loophole is the right word, but any like fragile chain into this legal framework. And the second question is about the criteria.
Yeah.
Can you, you talk, you explain the criteria, no? But can you get a little bit more concrete about it? Maybe especially in the case of Huawei, that you were saying, it's like the flagship case, I guess. No? So what was, not the risk itself. I think we understand the risk in terms of security and in terms of autonomy or sovereignty, as we said. But how do you fundament it? How do you I don't know if I'm sorry, my business is very interesting. How do you justify the decision, no? In terms of like in legal intellectual argumentation, no? How do you like concretely, because like an expectation of a technology robbery, I don't know, outsourcing, territorial outsourcing, this is like an expectation, right? So we're not futurologists, right? We are like lawyers and civil servants, right? So how can you make like a future expectation into a legal argument to justify such an important decision? And the last thing I want to say is that I'm very glad about this presentation because it proved that you can really build up like market-friendly framework, no? As you say, it doesn't stop the economy, it doesn't stop the FDI inflows. I think that's what's gonna be once to hear. I think I'm sure you already know that. The good narrative. So yeah.
So, in terms of like the sectors go, they're all like registered businesses, and they'll have, you know, even like websites that say what they do, and maybe they've got a kind of a one of the things they have to do is supply to the UK in one way or another, and as part of the notification system, they need to tell us about contracts they have with government partners, because you're not going to know instantly, essentially, that they have a contract with the MOD. As if you're something like the Foreign Office like us, you won't know that instantly. But it's something that kind of commercial teams within those government departments can say, we know this business, so we can say, or we can say, yes, we have contracts with them, or they provide certain products or assets, have certain sites that are relevant to a particular sector. So maybe it's not perfect with the kind of definitions of the sectors, but it's usually pretty obvious where they fit into the system. So as far as loopholes go, so I'd say the system isn't perfect, still evolving and changing. But something else that we can talk about another time, I think, because I know. But in terms of like the criteria on and justification of what we do, as you say, Huawei is definitely the flagship case. But there are 4 definitions that come into account with the kind of national security criteria, and that's things like threats to critical national infrastructure, potential uplift of malicious actors, and things where there's kind of a backdoor into how the UK runs, how we run our army or navy or whoever, and opening that weakness or that risk, and having a direct entrance into it. So like Huawei, having access to all data, all activity that goes on, things like that, it's a national security risk. There was the example in Chile is the ID one. I can't remember exactly what the name was. Yeah.
Fabrication of passports and national IDs.
Exactly. So when you have something like that that's being acquired, it's a threat to national security. Whether you determine that as national security as an umbrella term or something specific, it can be described as a threat to national security. So because of the data it has, the IP, etc. And then when the justification comes, that is part of the final order, that is part of the act and the bill itself. So I don't know the entire thing off the top of my head, but things that this is something that I can come back to on.
And what about public tendering? Because that's like the other side of this new securitization of international economic relations. And what about, because in the European Union they have made also a reglamento, this norm, this bill, to double check like public tendering for national and public infrastructure, sorry. And one of the criteria to avoid a public tender be allocated to a foreign company that could threat the national security is actually to be subsidized by the foreign government, because you compete into the free market is polluted, contaminated, or what I mean. If you compete with a subsidy back home, your national government, you are competing with European companies for the same public contract with illegitimate advantage, right? So did you do anything like that in the UK too to avoid? Again, it was like the last case I saw, it was in Romania, like a solar panel, like electric plant with solar energy. was allocated to a Chinese company and then it was screened out by the European Commission because of this. So it was like the second bill that you need to implement. What about the UK? Are you working on it too?
In terms of like the other way around, yeah, so we are,
Public investment, like foreign direct investment, is what we talk today, you know?
yeah,
And also we have like, I mean, it's like legally it's not the same, but in terms of politics, it is kind of well connected, right? Because it's about building infrastructure back in your country, which is public owned. So there's been a lot of Chinese companies building public infrastructure in South America and in Europe, especially like Shanghai Port last week, weeks ago, that is, the whole world has been talking about it, it was like a very big news, right? So this is a public infrastructure, and there is different ways to build a public infrastructure by a foreign company, but countries like Chile, all in fact, I mean, Chile had become, it was a very poor country like 20 years ago, let's say, and I'm oversimplifying, of course, but we managed to get a kind of good quality public infrastructure, road, port, etc., electricity grid, thanks to this public tendering contracts. There's a lot, there's like 3 or 4 of them, with different scenarios, but thanks to the foreign companies coming to, they're not investing, we are investing. It's actually investing in the foreign company by giving it a contract, or the foreign company is investing by getting a concession contract. They bring the money to build that infrastructure and then they will exploit it, like the highways now, the example. So this kind of thing is not going, there is no, or maybe UK has already all the infrastructure you need, so there is no foreign company trying to win politics. It's not an issue in the UK.
Well, so I mean, I think obviously the UK economy is just like any other economy, we rely on foreign direct investments, particularly in, you know, emerging tech, that type of thing, because, you know, we have a good R&D kind of science and innovation network, but, you know, it's how do you take the next step and spin those things out of academia. You know, a similar thing with Chile. You're right, the other side of the coin is as important, and at the moment there is a bill, legislation being, you know, progressing through Parliament on procurement. So public procurement. So that has been identified as something that, you know, is as important in terms of how you legislate for, you know, or update the legislation to guide how UK does procurement, noting all the issues that you can summarise. So that is going through Parliament at the moment. All have been announced.
it's being written at the moment. They kind of forecasted time for it to be in effect is about February, but
so this is a, you know, the new government in the UK, Labour, who came to power in July, so the summer, UK summer, are pushing that forward. But, you know, until it has passed Parliament, has been voted on, and kind of has come forward, you can't, you know, who knows exactly what the terms of that legislation would look like.
it talks about things like vendors of concern as well. So when you see like trends with government procurement and having the same kind of screening process go the other way, you can pick out and cooperate with other countries and other governments to understand, you know, are these the right people to buy from? Is this the right kind of process to take? And I say it's not coming into effect yet, so there's still a lot being kind of discussed and developed. But yeah, it's something it's kind of.
And ultimately, it's the same thing as Chile, again, an personal observation, not an official government position, is thinking about, which is, you know, having the majority of any one sector reliant or dependent on any one country is not a good idea. Because, for example, if there is war elsewhere in the world, you know, and I think, you know, Europe has seen this being dependent on Russian gas, and only Russian gas for energy supplies. Germany, for example, the economic powerhouse of Europe, in hindsight, was not a good idea. Because when the Ukraine war happened, it put them in a real issue. And yet there were some kind of complicating factors, because Germany, after the 2011 Fukushima thing, had decided to close down the nuclear power network again, which made them more dependent on one specific delivery mechanism for their energy. So the diversification is the kind of the name of the game.
Yeah.
I think it's a normal or a board tendency that's been already documented for the World Trade Organization. How many more countries since the pandemic are establishing monitoring process like investment screening at some level? That's the tendency today.
I think it's a total tendency today, and as I said before, it's not like you are against or for some a mechanism like that will protect you and everything's about the fine print. But in Chile, I'm sorry to say that I'm a bit, I'm maybe a little bit too pessimistic when I'm asked to say this. There is not even a debate. I mean, there was like some buzz, you say, in the media
Yes.
with the electricity, the CG, CGA company, acquisition by State Grid company from China. But I mean, we made a little paper on that. I can send it to you if you want. It's in Spanish, but it's so long. It's called a case report. So it's like a research with a very big empirical base. It's more like a description and synthetic analysis of the public controversy involved in these two cases, the state grid acquisition of CG and also the passport gate or the passport saga. And so you can see that, like, I mean, legally, there is no. I did the legal part of the. There is not much to be said. I mean, it is what it is. You cannot invent a bill if it's not enacted to apply it, right? So I mean, because in the screening, like the normal screening did happen, and it did happen, no? So the acquisition was totally valid. The only consideration was antitrust. So there is antitrust. They respect the antitrust law, but they did nothing to say. The passport thing was totally the opposite. It was a total mess. Apparently, there was a lack of cooperation or communication between the Home Office, Ministerio del Interior, and Foreign Affairs. So apparently, we didn't have a bill neither to avoid like a public procurement when there is a national security consideration or diversification consideration or whatever. So it did pass, and then they canceled it. And thanks to God, and I don't know if that's the right expression, but happily, the Chinese company didn't sue Chilean government, because if they could have, I mean, I wish I could be the lawyer on that case, because it would be so easy to win. And you would get, and the Chinese company could have cashed the whole amount of the contract without doing anything. I think there's a lot of chances that will happen. It's called responsabilidad patrimonial de la administración. It's like a typical case in public law in continental European administrative law tradition, etc., etc. So I'm telling you, so legally there is not much to be said because we didn't have the bill. So, but politically, or maybe in the media, the debate was quite a kind of poor.
Yes, but I was sure.
So there is no analysis. There is no real conversation like this one we're having today about these topics, and this is kind of worrisome. Because it's not about being for or against, it's how do you do it, and after a rational and deep conversation, you can do something adapted to your needs. It is more about putting infrastructure maybe than for investment.
And what do you think that the Congress, with your experience in Chile, could think about starting to talk or discuss about an investment screening law in Chile? Do you think they are prepared, or do you think it is a long term?
I mean, if some deputy asks me, I will say go for it, but not go for it or against it. Go for studying it, right? So use some money, it's not so expensive. I don't know, hire some consultant, some scholar who will write a report about they will read like the UK experience, European experience mostly. They make a set of literature, there is a lot of papers going on about it, like academic papers, I don't know, they make some recommendations. I will say totally go for it. So, but if you ask me, are they gonna do that, or are they worried about that? I don't know. I don't want to be too negative, too pessimistic, but politics is, in Chile nowadays are like it's based on like short-term stopping fires. Can you see that in English?
Yeah.
So this hour here, I don't know, a photo of the ex-boyfriend or girlfriend of the president. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm so sad to look about it, but yeah, it is laughable. So I mean, it's like very short term. But I want to think that maybe you can find not the Naranjo guy who is the MP who protested the most against China in the case, but I'm sure you can find. Yeah, we can ask around if you need. We can help you out to build some strategy to have conversation with. And I think we need more with the Frente Amplio. They're the only ones who may have some sensibility about national autonomy, sovereignty, and diversification. The rest of the elite is kind of
Chile has always been branded as a very open country to international trade, so I wonder how the public opinion will take discussion on investment screening as steering, for instance, that could hinder investment.
It's interesting you say that because I don't know if you're familiar with Athena Lab. So they do an annual poll where they talk about security concerns in Chile from an international perspective, but also from a prime perspective. And I think in the last one, they always ask the same question about, do you think Chile should look at and protect the investments that are coming in? So I think there's a question about that. And I think 80% of people say, well, of course, yes. But it's easy to say yes, but it's hard to kind of bring in a system to do it. I think the example you talk about, Enrique, about the kind of the civil register is interesting because I think on the one hand, it shows that Chile, when it needs to, can informally do something to protect against investment that for whatever reason is not seen as being politically acceptable. And I guess it was a political kind of decision. On the other hand, not having a process which gives you a legal basis to do that is also is a weakness.
Absolutely.
It might be that you have a system, eventually Chile has a system that it doesn't often use, but it's there if it ever needs it. And who's to say what the criteria for making that decision will be in the future? But I guess that's the kind of, the UK, frankly, found itself in that position with the Huawei, debacle. There was a lot of public debate, and then there was a lot of uncertainty about what the UK could do about it. Hence why, ultimately this legislation was updated. And it gives the government another option.
So they rush to update this to the new law, not the new.
Yes.
I think the point you made about the numbers show that this framework doesn't slow down the FDI inflow in your country, and this is key. And I think the public opinion, generally, as you said, they are okay with that. People turn on the TV and see more wars than 3 years ago. So I cannot, it's more like in the general atmosphere. But secondly, like foreign policy or technical issues about public economic law, the public opinion doesn't care.
Well, I think it's very,
It's not so sensitive, I think.
the context is very different as well. So in Europe, there is a major land war going on. When the Russians invaded Ukraine, people in the UK, because of the impact on the European energy sector in particular, found their bills going up from, say, 200 lucre a month to 500 lucre a month, just for their energy bill. So that had a huge immediate impact on the people's money in their pocket, and therefore people were immediately very interested in talking about it and trying to do something about it. So that brings it home in the way that it's just not the same. The public debate isn't the same here. And let's be honest, it would be the same if it was the other way around. If there was a war in Latin America, people in the north of England wouldn't have the same kind of, wouldn't be experiencing it the same.
But what do you think they want, because they are our youngsters, the young generation of Chilena, well informed in international relations alumni. They usually do it from our bachelor degree. They are working with us as a research assistant. So it's like our hope. What do you think about that? Like public opinion in Chile will be interested, will be against, will be for increasing the, let's call it, economic protection system on the base of national security reasons or not? I don't care. What?
Well, I wanted to follow up on your last comments because I think that regarding probably what would the public debate in Chile would look like if we came up with an investment act. I think that one of the first concerns or oppositions would be, why are we even talking about this when over the last 5 years, 10 years, we have seen a slowing down of the economy? So why are we even considering this? But then also what you just said is very important. It's important for us having this experience in other countries that, for example, stop this initial blockage by showing that, hey, we have the experience of the UK, they have this screening act, it's working perfectly fine, they have mechanisms for not filtering or discriminating by geopolitical effects, and it doesn't stop investments. So I think that one of the It's for me, I think that it's sad that we have to wait for other countries to engage on these acts to see the results so we can trust the process. But whatever, you have the case of the UK, so I think that sharing your results is a critical component for starting the debate here in Chile, at least from my perspective, because otherwise the first stop blockage to talking or debating about this would be the economical factor that currently in our country we're talking about slowdown in investment and why it would be try to stop it anymore. So I think this is a very valuable experience, the one we've had from the UK. That's
And what about the elite? Like in Chile, we always talk with our colleagues here in the institute that there is a big part of the Chilean local elite who is like a little bit like in the 90s. We say like laughing about it. Like they haven't updated their software to the securitization of international relations, right? Or the post-pandemic world order. I don't know. I mean, we're still looking for a name to name. But currently we are not anymore in the old globalization, right? So, so this part of the elite, they're still like, I mean, I'm a bit provocative here, no? But is to try to make myself clear. They're still like insisting on the importance of making more free trade agreements, so updating the old ones, and not, I don't know, the priority is not to make new framework like this, like the one we're talking today, but to go to. I have this anecdote. A colleague told me that they went to the India like 2 years ago, a mission of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to India, and the conversation with one of some high official of the economy ministry of India. They asked them if we can talk about making a free trade agreement with Chile. And he told me that, I mean, India doesn't have any free trade agreement with anyone. So you have like the first visit of the Chilean government to India asking for a free trade agreement. You know what I mean? It's like surreal, right? And apparently the meeting didn't went so well, kind of finished earlier than they expected, because they maybe didn't read enough about the Indian foreign policy or trade policy background. So that's an example of that, no? What do you think about it? Do you think the elite will like associate this kind of framework to opposition of what they think that they want to still
from the perspective of the Chilean economic insurgent strategy and the mindset of the elites, I would bet that it would be more feasible to propose a screening investment act through a free trade agreement, for example, by bringing into discussion the negotiation of the free trade agreement with the UK post-Brexit. Maybe it would be more easy to come up with an investment act with a provision in a new agreement than coming up with this law by ourselves because of the outdated mindset, as you mentioned. We are so oriented towards 1990s globalization, free trade agreement mentality that in the Chilean landscape we have not taken into public debate the evolution of not only trade agreements, but also general economic relations and security and different interactions. So once again, I bet that it would be easier for us to adopt some screening mechanisms if some other countries propose us to do it, new agreement, international agreement, rather than coming up with by ourselves, which is once again unfortunate, but it's more like the reality of what we have here from what. Yeah.
What do you think, Leonardo, about this? Like the public opinion in Chile and the elite intellectual atmosphere? Are they ready or not for this conversation to happen?
I think that Chile is lack of an investment screening mechanism. Many rights concerns over the public opinion about potential risks in sectors like mining or energy. But once again, I think that public opinion is not important to policymakers here in Chile. Maybe with the use how do we say socialist partnerships, right?
Social outbursts, they call it.
It was a big moment of well, the politicians said that the comments of the people was important, but nowadays I think that it doesn't matter to
to that.
That's very interesting because I have a feeling that actually sometimes policies are made based on what polls show. And so the latest polls show that, for instance, this or that topic is important, and then they come up with a new proposal for a law based on that. So that leads us to have this very short view on public policy. So in that sense,
Let me share with my point of view. I understand that the point maybe here in Chile could be government problem or social problem. That is all in all the world. But I have experience as a finance professional, and if I saw a lot of time here in Chile has a framework to obtain or to manage the investment, and in my view, in my experience, investment you can receive very easy. We have no problem. The investment and get out. And when you pay dividend or when the investment go out, is no problem. All the framework manage and function very well. For example, also you have experience, for example, or law in transfer pricing, and all the organisms function very well. And check.
And you're saying that there is we're expecting to projects in Chile of data centers?
Well, that's my understanding. That is a trend. It's a trend globally. I've heard that is, a intention here in Chile as well, because of the way it drives the economy. It drives, it is also, you can use. Chile has an abundance of renewable energy, solar in the north, wind in the south. So, it can use that renewable energy for those data centers, for example. I think there's two things that I might just we haven't touched on necessarily. First, Fred, do you want to talk about beneficial ownership a little bit more and the links to then organised transnational crime, illicit finance? That's one aspect. And then I'm also conscious that, we mentioned the Singaporean kind of system at the start, so we can come around back to that and talk about how they do it slightly differently to the UK, but again, it's what they've decided works for them. And obviously, there are always questions about how effective that system is or not.
Yeah, so the beneficial ownership stuff is part of the that triage stage where I mentioned it on the presentation. When you have those structure charts that are sent from the businesses to the investment security unit, you can see on I say pre and post acquisition what the structure of the company looks like, or what the structure of the transaction looks like. So you'll have maybe a business or an investment vehicle or a holding company that's based in France buying a business in Chile. It would be reported as a French investment, but in reality, it's an investment vehicle or a holding company that goes further up the line to a Chinese or American or wherever beneficial owner, like ultimate beneficial owner. So with our system, one of the things that is recorded for all of them, all of the transactions, is UBO, ultimate beneficial owner. So you can see where the money's coming from. You can see where the origin investment's coming from. That's why we can report so accurately on where the origin of the investment is from, because it's not masked or hidden. So we can open that up.
Well, the tax havens avoid this, no? Like Cayman Island or Macau.
To some extent, I'm not 100%.
I think the intention is obviously it is a system, which means the system can be gamed, and there is a little bit of cat and mouse in terms of. Let's turn the recording off. There's a bit of a cat and mouse about how.
It's only for our community. It won't be posted to social media or the.
There's a bit of, it is a constant battle between governments and also entities who wherever they're from. And, it could be a state actor that is trying to mask that it is making an investment. But equally, of concern to the UK, because, London previously hasn't had the best reputation as a kind of money laundering centre, international money laundering centre, illicit finance. It also could be transnational crime organisations, or it could be, non-state actors. And I think driving down on that, identifying the beneficial ownership has some kind of, this is not the point of this system, but it has some positive side effects. Because if you can drive illicit finance out of your financial system, it means there's more space for legitimate business to make more profit because they're not having to compete. It also means that you can combat and impact the ability of transnational crime organizations to make profits, which they then, or to launder their profits through drugs or migration.
Yeah, that's a good narrative for Chile because everybody's obsessed about the security.
So that, that is, again, it's national security, but writ large crime. Or, for example, it also helps the economy because it, again, this, possibly a problem here in terms of tax revenue, protecting your tax revenue or assuring tax revenue. So if you drive out illicit finance and it's all legitimate business pays tax, it pays more tax, which then gives you more money, which is good for the national interest because you can afford more services for your people, or you can afford to update your pensions or healthcare systems, or you can afford to reduce your business taxes and thereby attract more investment. So there's that angle as well, and the UK is not a world leader in transparency in its financial system, or hasn't been historically, but recently we've been doing a lot more in terms of we have a register of beneficial ownership for companies in the UK, and trying to be a bit more transparent about who owns what.
There's the same movement and this.
So actually, and then this is again not public information, but Fred Boss in the Foreign Office in London is responsible for both investment security, but also that transnational crime and illicit finance.
Yeah.
So it's two sides of the same coin. I think that is an important part of the debate too.
Maybe, I don't want to overstep, but you as diplomats in Chile, I hope you can find policymakers and lawmakers that will give you their ears to listen to this kind of narrative. This is the right one. It doesn't stop FDI inflow. There is no evidence showing that this screening mechanism slow down our economy. And secondly, there is it cannot be dissociated to the international crime organization and finance flows. I think a lot of people will jump they will be hungry to know more, and study more, especially our students, because I'm also the coordinator of a master's degree here that Diego just finished, and Leonardo is almost finishing. It's the master's degree of international strategy and trade policy. So we are always looking for dissertation topics. We have to make this master's degree dissertation at the end of the last semester, in the second year. So yeah, let's keep in touch. I think this conversation give me like 2 or 3 big topics for students that maybe they can contact you to have a conversation, or maybe a formal interview for the research, in terms of how feasible it could be to implement this kind of frameworks in Chile. I'm sure one of the students could be interested in working on that. And it's a way to build up some knowledge on the most basic level. I know a master's dissertation is more like a formative work so the student can be educated into research. Yeah. But sometimes, as the Diego dissertation, it brings some results who will be quoted by other papers, I guess, for others like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm always happy to help. Fred, do you want to, just conscious of time, I think we've got some time.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Singapore.
touch on Singapore?
Yeah, so their system is the Office for Significant Investment Review, and it came into effect in March this year, I believe, and it was something that we worked closely with them on. So the kind of discussion started in early 2023, and it was a joint kind of consensus that they wanted to update what they had to create something that would work for them. And we kind of approached them with our system, our NSIA, and said, how can we work together to implement some of the same legal powers and the kind of similar systems, the notification systems, things like that, but make it work in an economy that is completely different to the UK.
And so there's no military industry.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything from you and the EU.
Yeah. So our 17 sectors would fit, right? So to kind of prioritize Singapore's national infrastructure and kind of the things that are vital to running every day, they have 9 designated businesses. So one of those is Shell as an example, and they're kind of involved in Singapore. So when something like a similar trigger event to the UK system of a significant investment, say, I think it's like to do with voting rights and like 20% ownership of the company, things like that, as like the minimum. And when something like that occurs in one of those 9 businesses, the Singaporean system is then triggered and a notification occurs, and then they have similar powers to the system that we have, and they can take the same access restrictions, asset site data, whatever powers that we have with our bill into their system as well. So as I say, it's something that we've been working with them on for a long time.
Sorry, I didn't understand it well, I think. So in Singapore, the mechanism is based on the percentage of ownership of the
So ours
more than
as
in
well.
the 17 sensitive areas.
Yeah, so ours,
Both.
our 17 sectors, if you're buying a business, if you're buying like at least 20% of a business, that's one of the things that can occur for the UK system.
Okay.
For the Singaporean system, it's only one of 9 businesses. So if somebody buys 20% of one of those 9 businesses.
And 9 businesses, you mean sectors of activity?
No, businesses in particular for Singapore.
A company.
Yes, companies, sorry, yes.
9 companies.
Yeah. So they have 9 designated companies that are.
And what kind of activity? I mean, international finance.
Yeah, it's, as I say, things like Shell and
I'm sorry.
Shell's a big,
sorry,
what's
not to be.
The big one.
Sorry.
It's based in Singapore. Shell, I didn't know.
They've got a.
they have a big presence there, a big regional kind
Yeah.
of entity. So
Okay.
they're a local entity.
Yeah.
They also have a big presence in Brunei, for example.
Yeah.
They're obviously part with the oil in Brunei.
Yeah, exactly. So, I can't remember all the business off the top of my head, but, yeah, there's 9 of them that are kind of critical to Singapore running day to day. So when they kind of, when there's,
Semiconductor too, I guess.
yeah, so you have, their kind of national security concerns are around Singapore running day to day. Because if all your energy disappears, you can't run anything else, so your national security is compromised. And that's energy security as well.
Well, it's energy security, right? Singapore is an international financial centre, so we come back to the same thing about data, about energy supply, about assuring the fact that the computers will stay on and you're connected to the world. Because if those 2 things don't happen.
But yeah, ultimately, it's a country that we've been working with a lot over the past years, and we've got projects running in other Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia and the Philippines.
Actually, I'm sorry to make like a little in parenthesis. I'm trying to convince Diego to, because he wants to make a PhD in political economy or international relations. And I'm trying to convince him to apply for the National Singapore University, but he wants to go to the USA or the UK. I'm trying to say, oh no, maybe.
I would see the UK. Good shout.
Yeah.
Maybe you can ask for advice. No, just kidding. Like, yeah, it's fascinating. No, it's really well. I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
Singapore cases. I see that. Okay, so the UK has talked with the Singapore government for this. I didn't know that. It's kind of. Yeah,
I mean, the Singaporean system is different as well.
Absolutely.
And it's different from the UK system, the Chilean system. So the Singaporeans took what, a year from deciding they do it to legislating it and having it
You see,
in place.
you make a PhD in what you have.
That won't happen. That wouldn't happen in the UK, and I don't think it would happen here either. So,
And any other country you have collaborated to, like I think Ireland maybe something. No,
I mean, that's all European.
There's
so Ireland are EU member states, so
Yeah.
they, but yes, when we were in the EU, we were quite involved in these discussions.
Yeah.
Now we have a different kind of
BBC.
viewpoint.
And yeah, as I say,
BBC.
we've
I
got
missed the free travel, yeah.
yeah, we've got the projects going in Cambodia, Philippines, Laos. We're looking at Thailand as well, which is recent. And then we've got a kind of concept project starting in Zambia in Africa. But another thing that we do is just collaborate with countries that are like-minded anyway. We share information, we share best practice with American partners, Japan, Korea, France, Germany, you name it, essentially.
So which countries are more willing, like, to really? Or do you think they are studying it seriously to implement a framework like this?
Yeah. So
Which one?
So Cambodia and Philippines are like the kind of the two behind behind Singapore in terms of like length of program. So when you're talking to these countries, you quickly can determine what is a priority for their economy. And for like Chile, it's this kind of like transnational serious organized crime, and finance is one of the big things to push, as well as kind of the general kind of security as that aspect.
Well, in the Philippines, fishing.
Yeah, exactly. It's things like oil, like Malaysia's one as well, that's shipping oil into the country and making sure that it's legitimate. Because there was a case, well, not a case, but there was a example where Venezuelan oil, sanctioned Venezuelan oil, was being masked as Malaysian, and when it was shipped over to certain countries, only when you actually see it, you can think, well, it's actually Venezuelan oil. But because there are no legal protections or legal powers or thing in place, it's easy for those who ship it to say, well, yeah, it's Malaysian oil. Don't know what we're talking about. So an investment screening mechanism can talk about sanctions and tariffs and legitimate business, things like that, as well as just kind of our system, which has the national security and the protection and the promotion of this. There's more to it. It's a much deeper system when you tailor it in a certain way. And then even just how it works. So our system has all the government departments kind of feeding into the cabinet office. The Singaporean system is managed out of the Ministry of Trade and Industry and doesn't have as much kind of cross-governmental communication because it doesn't need to. So there's no point trying to force that on their system when it doesn't need to happen. And similarly with like one of the main kind of things we're talking about with the other Southeast Asian countries is capacity and the kind of what the resources they have that they can dedicate to something like this. And usually will be from a single government department and then consult as it needs to. So
Mr. Campos.
Yeah.
So what is your feeling after talking with the civil servants and representing in Chile? Do you think they were interested and well informed about this, or they were more distracted and reading WhatsApp?
No, they were engaged, but there was I think a lot of the questions about how it works, the process itself, and things like that. Because obviously, it's something that is, I think, it's not like being for or against it. It's how it works, how you can make it work from Chile. So that was the response from a lot of the kind of civil servants that we've been talking to, and there was appetite for it. There was interest in it, and it was just kind of understanding what the best way to pitch it would be, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not for necessarily the people we've been talking to drive this forward, and it requires political will in order to enact it and a public debate. Arguably, both things which don't exist at the moment in a sufficient enough amount to actually drive this forward. So I think it's more on the side of people being very good at their jobs. Understanding what different systems are out there and being ready to then advise later on.
Is the first time you try to make this conversation with the Chilean government about the topic?
Yeah,
I think it's the first time we as the UK government have engaged specifically with someone from our team in London, in Latin America, in this way. It is not, again, like I said at the start, it's not just lobbying Chile to do anything, it is us more understanding what the international situation is and who's where in the process, because that affects how we approach it too. And we have just as much, if not more, to learn from other people. Rather than us saying, oh, this is the way to do it. It's entirely dependent on Chile's national interest and what works for Chile.
We adapted to the local needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Philippines or Chile.
Yeah, exactly.
Singapore.
But it's part
Better to be prepared and don't use it than you use it and you don't use it, no?
Yeah, like an IT manager or
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. I'm really learning a lot, guys. I'm a bit ashamed that there is no more people in the room. But let's try to make it happen again, Adam and Claudia. Because maybe with the new procurement bill is gonna pass, maybe it will be an option. You can both come and give a seminar, and we can try to invite the profile of actor that you want to actually reach. Maybe not an MP, but I don't know, some scholar from the law department, faculty of law, or not. Let's think about how can we can help, because for us as a researcher, this is a very interesting topic. It's not a study at all in Chile. There is a lot of room for doing that for our strategy as professors and educators and researchers, right? So yeah, let's keep in contact and let's think about another occasion we can talk about. But as you said, I mean, the thing is that I have to be, I'm really sorry to say that, but the first time we heard about this screening procedure in Chile was like US and Spanish weird lobbying, inviting some scholars. It was like semi-underground.
When did it happen?
Like really, now it's even in the Financial Times. It's about Peru. Yeah, with the Chanker. It was even now. I mean, before it was like a rumor. But, it happened like 1.5 years ago. They make meetings with professors from here, professors from Catholic Uni, and we guess they didn't stop that, right? They try and make it the same. And we probably, I don't know, like maybe journalists, MPs, I don't know. But the rumor was, the gossip story was there. And as I said, after that, when there was it was March 23. An article of Financial Times about Chancay Port, and now everybody's talking about it before last summer. They mentioned it that the US Foreign State Department they didn't say the word lobbying, no, but there's something is trying to influence the Peruvian government to implement a screening procedure for everyone. Yeah. It's like it's printed. So I think it was a little bit what you say, no, before, like it was maybe the topic was considered a little bit like the global north coming again to tell you what to do, you know. So, but I think you guys know that more better than I do. So I'm sure you will manage to find the right strategy narrative. No, I hope this conversation helped you out at least to do some brainstorming. I don't want to overstay. I'm sure you are very good at it. We are just scholars and students here. But yeah, try to talk as many Chilean actors as you can. I think it's the way. Okay.
Thank you very much for hosting us.
Yes, thank you.
No, I hope, I mean, it's a request always to work with British and I don't know, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Konger, I mean, British scholars or British educated scholars. We share a lot of things like critical thinking and try to be deep into analysis. I don't know, I really feel comfortable with this kind of, not just British, but like British educational system scholars, especially from Asia, like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia. We interact with them a lot. And we always have a very deep conversation. Sometimes when you deal with other scholars from other countries are different, not so deep. So yeah, guys, I hope we can have you soon again. And yeah, just keep in touch. You want to say anything else to Claudia?
Thank you very much for attending. I didn't hear.
Very interesting, because here in Chile, the articulation between the different ministers is difficult. Could you explain briefly how government departments collaborate during the review process? How do you manage conflicting opinions between departments on whether to allow or intervene?
I mean, I'll take it right back to basics. Don't stop me if I'm being condescending, because I'm not trying to be. The UK government's quite big, quite a few government departments, but it's a cabinet system of government. So the Prime Minister chairs the cabinet and all the cabinet ministers sit at the table. They make a decision. Once the decision's made, even if they disagree with it internally, they are bound by what we term collective responsibility to put that decision into play. So, as part of that, when you have disagreements between departments, you have a couple of ways that you can, solve those disagreements. Ultimately, the Prime Minister, as the head of government, not the head of state, makes a decision, or will be the one to cast the deciding vote, saying, right, we're going to do this. And then the cabinet say, okay, we're going to do that, and off they go. So, whatever disagreements they have going up to cabinet level, once the cabinet level comes back down, and you should find that all the departments just get on and do what the decision is that has been made. In the case, that's the cabinet kind of system. There is a government department in the UK that we call the Cabinet Office, which is led by a Secretary of State level minister, which is a cross-cutting government department. So you have number 10 as the head of, the Prime Minister's office, comes into the Cabinet Office. It's not quite like this, but this is how I'm going to explain it. Cabinet Office sits across everything in government. So they can decide, right, I need a report from you, Department for Trade, I need a report from you, Department for Transport, because I'm going to coordinate on this policy issue that isn't one government department. It's bigger than just trade, it's bigger than just energy. And then, so that is where the Secretary of State of that department is the one who makes the decisions on these investment security. He asks for advice from all the other government departments, including, importantly, in economic analysis. So, what's really important is, if we say no to this investment, what do we lose out on? What's the number of jobs getting created? What is the size of the investment? What effect do I get have on UK GDP increasing? So he asks for that advice, and then he makes a decision. If they have a big disagreement at that point, they can take it to cabinet and discuss it at the cabinet meeting.
Exactly, that's where that window opens for others just to pitch in and add on to the assessments that have been commissioned. That's one of the things that happens when something's called in. You have an initial call with the relevant government departments that have pitched in to say, we want to commission an assessment from you, an assessment from you, an assessment from you, and that goes all into that final investment security risk assessment that's then given to the minister.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give applause to our guests, please. Let me warn you for the.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Gracias.